Well, it's way into the depths of night, and as you can see, the refugee from Portsmouth is sitting there, serene, after a day in which he threw several people into jail, shouted at the judge, and managed to get away with his life. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Keith. Lovely to see you.
And what
Thank
sort of
you.
day did you actually have?
Thank you for accommodating me later in the evening, because this week, otherwise, I simply wouldn't have been able to do anything.
Your fans demand your presence.
Well, I'm not sure that's true, but it's kind of you to suggest it. But tomorrow, I'm going to have what I always like, and you mustn't repeat this, Keith. This is simply between you and me.
Right,
Nobody listens to the bloody program. I'm going to have a little chat with the defendant that I'm prosecuting. And I always call it a chat, which is where they're in the witness box. And it's probably one of the reasons why I still do the job, Keith, I'll be honest with you, that I thoroughly enjoy that process. I don't want to harm anybody. I don't want to make anybody feel bad. I want to get justice if possible. But I love it when they answer my questions in the wrong way. Sorry, that's my dog. That's my dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
And indeed, you introduced me to him on Sunday, I think it was.
Yeah. Jed the collie is here with me, and wondering why on earth Dad is still awake after 8 o'clock at night. No, so I'm back there tomorrow. It's an odd thing, cross-examining people, Keith, because unlike evidence in chief, and I know that Phil and I have spoken about that previously, where you know where you're going, taking the witness through their statement or statements. Evidence in cross-examination can take various forms. Sometimes people are very formulaic, and they will have a list of questions and they will ask them in the same order regardless. That is not, if any of you out there want to become barristers, take it from me, that is not a good way of cross-examining. You need to be really flexible. You need to have your points that you want to make, and you need to go with the flow. So sometimes witnesses, defendants, in this case a defendant, will say something that takes you down a different track, and that's fine, absolutely fine. But you need to be ready for that. So I'm not suggesting it's a skill or an art or anything like that. It's possibly a craft, which I've sought to harness in 30 odd years doing what I do. But you do need to be ready. And I feel, I'll be honest with you, Keith, I feel quite pumped up, quite filled with adrenaline when I cross-examine somebody. Not that it's not like America. Barristers aren't shouty. It's not that at all. But what you do need to do is to be ready for the answer, the wrong answer, if you see what I mean. And you get a coconut from the stall, and then you need to ask the next question that isn't on your list that will get your next coconut. And those days are beyond question the best days I've ever had in court, cross-examining people who are lying. rolling them down and showing that they're not telling the truth. And I'm sure, Keith, you've probably had this as a journo, haven't you?
Well, in television, when I'm training youngsters, I say there is only one important question in an interview, and that's the first one. Because how do you know how somebody is going to respond? And I mean, I'm sure that you've seen these very strange interviews which seem to be disjointed because the interviewer insists upon going down his list of questions, and the person answering isn't giving the expected, anticipated reply.
You're absolutely right. And in fact, one thing that I said to the officer in my case this week, and I always say it too. So the officer in the case is the officer who is the police officer who's in charge of the investigation. So has the conduct of the case on behalf of the police, has all the papers, sits in court. Today with her, I read out the defendant's interview because he, of course, has a right to put his version of events, as you would understand. Reading that out is the dullest thing in the world, but it has to be done. It has to go on the record. So she reads out the questions, I read out the defendant's answer, and I have to do it neutrally, if you can see what I mean. The thespian in me is not allowed to come out, Keith, and that's a terrible, terrible loss
Drama
to me. But the point is, once you've got beyond that point and you're cross-examining somebody, which is what I'll be doing tomorrow, you simply don't know what they're going to say. You've got some idea, but you don't know exactly what they're going to say. And sometimes being able to go off-piste, as it were, with the answer that they give can in fact be very challenging for the witness. And that's whether you're prosecuting or defending. I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow, but who knows? It might happen. So that's my rather dull life, Keith, is that I'm getting up very early tomorrow morning. I'm probably going to get run over by you in your juggernaut. Your juggernaut, yeah. Your Pantechnicon will have me squashed into the road. But hopefully I can peel myself off the surface of the pavement and make my way down to Lewes train station. And as you may know, I think I've told you this, Keith, case I am doing, was due to be heard in Lewes, which is lovely because, as you know, I live in Lewes.
Absolutely. So, you could have hitched a ride with me and I could have deposited you right at the front door.
Yeah, it's just there. Boom. And on late on Friday, simply because of all these difficulties that I know I've told you about already, with courts being overcrowded, and Portsmouth isn't so overcrowded, this case got transferred to Portsmouth. So every morning I get up and I have to go to Portsmouth, which is in fact a buggeration, I think is the term I'm looking for. Because nobody wants to go to Portsmouth, do they?
I've never been to Portsmouth, so I can't answer the question.
Well, it is. And Keith, let me share my pub quiz knowledge with you. And at some point, I would quite like to have a pub quiz on here, or a quiz on here, because I'm quite keen on them.
Well, you're very welcome. Yes.
Portsea, so that's Portsmouth and Southsea, is an island. And it is the densest populated island in the whole of the British Isles. So that includes Ireland and Scotland and Wales and everywhere else. And I always think when I go there that it is the densest, but it's the densest in both senses of the word, if you know what I mean by that. It has a lot of people there. I'm not going to say anything further about that. Keith, I thought I'd just talk to you a little bit about family law today, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you mind if I just go ahead and do that?
Go ahead.
I practiced in family law for a number of years. My wife practices in family law. It's very different from what I do because I'm a criminal barrister. She's a family barrister. They don't even get to wear wigs, Keith. You know, the whole thespian thing of what, I need to have a wig on my head, otherwise I can't possibly do the job.
No, and pince nez with false glass in it.
Yeah, absolutely, completely. Yeah. Every affectation you could possibly want, Keith. I promise you. But I just thought I'd talk about that. Family law has a number of different areas to it, which in fact, oddly enough, are as different as each of them are from criminal law, which is what I do. So if people say that they're a family lawyer, you want to ask them, which bit of family law do you do? And at Westgate, where I, for reasons I don't even begin to understand, I'm still the head of chambers. We do all three main areas of family law, and they earn a damn sight more money than I do, Keith. Seriously, you just simply wouldn't believe it. I am not a fat cat lawyer. I promise you that. But these family people, they're not. They're moderately fat cats, I think it's probably fair to say. But there are three main areas that family law covers. I don't have any notes, so this is all extempore. If I lose my thread, I'm sorry, but I quite like to think that I can talk without notes. The first of which, of the three, is finances between a couple who divorce. So where a couple divorce, there needs to be some division of their assets. And there needs to be a process of determining what assets they actually have. And then a judge will determine who needs what. But it's all based upon future needs. So it's not, partly it's based upon their contribution. But in fact, in reality, it's really based upon future needs. That is, Keith, I have to tell you, in the strongest terms, the dullest subject I have ever dealt with. It really is. Now, when I was younger, I did a bit of that. I don't mean I got divorced. Who knows? We'll see in the future. But I didn't get divorced, but I did do divorce work. And the problem was that very often people couldn't afford to live in the same house because they were on a modest budget. And then once they've split up, there ain't enough money for those two households. And those are the cases you do when you're very junior at the bar. So when I was doing it, it would be trying to sort out people in Dartford or wherever it was, to try and find a way in which they could both get a house or a home and continue living there. And the odd thing about matrimonial finance, I still call it that, it's not called that anymore, but it's the division of funds between husband and wife, is that the more senior you get as a barrister, like me, if I was still doing it, I would be doing, mercifully I'm not, I would be doing the divorces of people who are extremely rich, because that's the way the career structure works, if you see what I mean. You start off with the very low paid cases, and as you progress, you get to the more expensive, lucrative cases.
Do all divorced couples have to go through this?
Sorry?
Do all divorced couples have to go through this?
Well, they can agree it. And there has been, I'm glad to say, increasing work to try to get couples to, they have to go through a process now, long after I did it. Probably because I stopped doing it. I don't know. They have to go through a process of talking to each other, possibly with somebody who will talk them through the process, an independent person, not a judge. And so often cases can be dealt with that way. But I have to say, Keith, that I found it increasingly dull. I told you it was dull. It becomes duller. It's almost like Phil. Maybe not quite as dull as him. Who, by the way, Manchester City having won on Saturday is, as I understand it, yet to wake up from the sofa. But he might see you later in the week. But let me give you an example. A chap who was in chambers with me, a slightly junior in call to me, but about my age, very bright lad. And I said, "What are you doing? You know, what are you doing at the moment?" And he said, "I'm doing Paloma Picasso's divorce." I said, "Good, blimey, that's something." And he said, "I'm off to New York to talk to her American lawyers." And I said, "You're doing that case?" He said, "No, she's got 2 silks and a senior junior, and then I'm the 4th one." So I said, "So unless a bus runs the 3 of them over, you're never actually going to be up on your hind legs talking to the judge?" He said, "Yeah." Now that's what I couldn't deal with.
Yeah,
You know, the idea that I wasn't able to address a court and flannel away, as you know, Keith, like I do.
Flannel isn't a term I would use, but just go ahead.
Yeah, no. So, so the odd thing about those finance cases is that the more senior you get, the easier they get. Because, you know, when I was doing them as a little weenie, still in my shorts, occasionally going to sports day at my school, I was very precocious as a barrister, as you could imagine, Keith. Those were cases where, in fact, the outcome was important for the people concerned. because could they live on what they had or not live what they had? If you carry on doing that sort of work as a barrister, I don't give a monkeys. They've got more than adequate money, and I just lost interest in it. I should have done it, because now I wouldn't be living in Lewes. I'd be living in, I might have bought the Gauges place just out at Firle, probably, had I done that. But I didn't. I've always chosen the less lucrative option. But also, dare I say it, I have the better stories. and your audience might now be shouting at the screen saying, "No, you don't. You are such a boring bastard," which is fine. But I did have that for a while in my work. The second area, if you don't mind me moving on to that, Keith, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Second area of family law that really comes up is about two parents who have separated, arguing about their children and who should have the children, and if one of them's not going to have the children, how often that person ought to see the children. Those are quite fraught hearings, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And it did get to the stage for me where talking about the pickup on Christmas Eve at McDonald's, got to me. I had had enough. It wasn't really something that I wanted to litigate, to discuss, to be party to, because I didn't give a flying whatever about that. And so I gave that up as well. And again, thereby meaning that I've still got a massive mortgage.
Was there any particular case that you remember that was very poignant?
Oh, I have to say, some of the litigants in those cases, and I'm not going to mention anybody particularly, but some of the cases where it's what's called private law. So that means there's no local authority involved or CPS involved or anything like that. Some of those cases involve people who were as absolutely mad as a box of frogs. And you would tell them and tell them and tell them again what they ought to do, and they wouldn't listen. And yes, I did have quite a few of those, one way and another, I'm afraid to say. People who and dare I say it, I know this sounds wrong of me, and I hope nobody takes it badly, but it's very usual that the mother keeps the children. Not always the case, but it's very often the mother who keeps the children. And then you have a father who is awkward, for want of a better term, who is unwilling to play ball, doesn't like what's going on, doesn't like the court process, sometimes can be quite aggressive to their lawyers. I recall doing a case where the mother had set up home with a new partner, who had written in biro on the back of a child. And that is a horrible thing to do.
Yeah.
And her, she was there at court. This was at the Royal Courts of Justice in London. She was there, and then the father, turned up. And her new partner turned up, who was a bouncer. And believe me, Keith, he was a big lad. And the case got called on. In other words, we were due to go into court. And I said to her and her partner that we need to go into court. And the father, unwisely, he was a little Weasley fellow, he tried to provoke the bouncer, the new partner, who just landed one on him. I was standing next to him. It was a proper knockout blow. Boom, like that. And he said, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that." I said, "That's fine." He said, "What should I do?" I said, "I suggest you go now." And he left the building, the Royal Courts of Justice, because he had knocked this fella out. Yeah. So that's sort of.
Did he revive in time to go into court?
No, yeah, because she was okay to go into court. Father wasn't, obviously, but we slapped him around and woke him up, and he came around, and that was okay. And frankly, I don't mean this in a bad way. I'm a lawyer, you know. He deserved it. He really deserved it. So good on him for doing that. There's an argument, Keith, which I have, not an argument, but it's a proposition that I have, with which nobody has ever agreed. And many of my propositions nobody's ever agreed with. I'm a little bit like Thomas Paine in that respect, you know. I'm
Welcome
not
to Mirador.
yeah, absolutely. And I think there might be merit. Sorry, I hope I'm not going on too long, Keith.
That's all right. No, we're only 28 minutes yet, so you've got another 10 or so. Yeah.
I think there might be merit in bringing back divorces where people have to prove fault. And I know that sounds really odd. Sorry, that's my dog.
Yes.
Come here, Jed. Come here. But the reason I say that is that people want to litigate. People want to have it out with the other side in family work. And they don't get that opportunity because we have no fault divorces. You can divorce because of adultery. You can divorce because of 2 years apart and consent. You can divorce because of the behavior of the other partner. That's very often the case. And those are always slightly trumped up, to be honest. Not in the Trump sense.
Manufactured.
and you can have 5 years separation without consent. So if you're married and you want a divorce, it could either be because your partner has committed adultery, or that they have misbehaved you in a way, or that it's 2 years down the line since you separated and you agree, or it's 5 years down the line, and then even if they don't agree. Now, the advantage of fault divorces, Keith, and this is a very old man's view, is that it allows people to express their anger at the other person, which otherwise doesn't happen. And lots of that comes out in this other litigation that I've just been speaking about. So about the finances, about the children, where people want to litigate, in other words, want to argue about things that aren't really relevant. And back in the day, look, before I joined the bar, and I'm not quite as old as you, Keith. I don't believe it. No,
Nobody's as old as me.
no. I think Methuselah. You're absolutely right. But for example, my first head of chambers, who was a lovely man, full of stories, did lots of work in Lewes. He made half of his living by doing divorces at the Royal Courts of Justice. Because back in the day, before I became a barrister, there would have to be a hearing about a divorce. And you could, walk over the road from where our then chambers were, and you just get silly money, frankly, for standing up and saying, well, this, my lord, will you grant the divorce? And the judge says yes. So it wasn't in any way contested or anything like that. Keith, I have to tell you a story about me, which doesn't reflect well on me. Many of my stories don't reflect well on me. And those are the best stories I have. Is that when I was still doing family work, I went to Slough County Court. Now, nobody chooses to go to Slough, do they? It's
Not
a
really.
punishment in itself. And I was representing a woman who was married to a bloke who at the time was sectioned under the Mental Health Act. And he got day release from the institution where he was then residing. And he therefore came to Slough County Court. And we had a contested hearing, because that was back in the day when you could contest divorces. So the other party could say, I don't agree that we should divorce. And this man who was sectioned under the Mental Health Act, in person, in other words, without a barrister, won. So I was the barrister who was beaten by somebody who was in fact mad in Slough. But these things do happen. And I had to go back to chambers and tell them. And of course, they were all just taking the whatever out of me as a consequence of that. So that, So those divorce cases were of some interest. Now, Keith, I don't know how we're doing for time. If you want to stop there, I've got my third bit, but I'm happy to do it on another occasion, because it's actually quite a long bit, and I might even persuade Mrs. B. I'm not sure I will.
To join you, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because that would be about
she's way in Blackpool or something at the moment, isn't she?
Yeah, but it's so what we move on to would be what's called public law in family,
right,
which is where social services become involved, and that's a big subject in itself.
Okay. Well, we've taken 35 minutes, and
Oh, bloody
we
hell.
could afford another 5. So why don't we use that 5 just to wrap up, and then you do part 3 the next time, next
No,
week.
that's fine. Yeah. So what would
Okay.
you like to ask me, Keith, or what can I ask you? I do have a pub quiz here that I've written. If you want that, you
Well,
probably don't.
I think what we'll do is we will set you up to do a pub quiz, and it is possible through the magic here for people to actually write in and ask you questions on the quiz. So we can we can perhaps set that up. That would be rather interesting.
I don't want a following.
You've got to have
Just
somebody to ask questions in the quiz.
the dog, the one man and his dog. Yeah. In fact, what happened is that my extended family, with lockdown, as many families did, set up a Zoom meeting because we're all disparate places, different countries. And we started off saying we'd have a quiz every week. And then everybody else said, oh, I can't think of a quiz. So since about June 2020, I have written 20 quiz questions every week. But I do enjoy it. I love it.
Yes. Well, you were actually testing the pub owner to see whether he got a decent question about Ringmer, as I recall.
I did do that. I did that. Did I ask you the question about who was the person who took the photographs on behalf of the Washington Post?
No, you didn't.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Washington Post had a staff photographer who's in your line of work-ish, if you see what I mean, Keith.
Yeah.
And she came over for the Queen's coronation.
The Queen's coronation?
Yes.
Wow.
1953.
We're back in 1953.
Yep. Who was she?
Well, it's probably a trick question that it would turn out to be somebody like I don't know, the wife of one of the presidents.
I'm going to give you half a point for that.
Thank you.
It was Jacqueline Bouvier
Kennedy,
who
right.
became Kennedy Onassis. But isn't that odd that she was actually at the coronation taking photographs?
For the Washington Post.
Yep. Yeah, I promise you, it is true. You can look. It's not just Wiki that has that; it's all over.
Yeah, was her husband there?
She didn't have a husband at the time.
No, later husband. I mean, in other words, was Kennedy there?
I don't know. Sorry, Keith. I've not looked at the wedding, at the coronation photos sufficiently to see whether he was or not. But I will do that. The next time we meet, I'll say, yeah, he was there. Look, here he is.
Actually, talking about Kennedy, quite often when I get into a discussion with colleagues and we're talking about what government should do and what we shouldn't do, is there was a docudrama made about Kennedy. And he and Bobby are seen standing at the White House window and watching the crowds amass when they started to get excited about civil rights. And they hadn't anticipated it. So Jack says to Bobby, Jesus, Bobby, what the hell do we do? And Bobby says, what we always do, Jack, nothing.
Yes, very good. But that's a quality pub quiz question that I put out to your one man and his dog if they wish to use it.
Yeah.
It's not
I'm sorry we gave the
copyrighted.
answer. Now we can't use it.
No, it's not copy. Well, because there are so many viewers that they will all know the answer. I'm sure of that. But it's not a bad little factoid, I think is the term I'm looking for.
It sounds just absolutely perfect for that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I gave you one that, I mean, it's a bit obscure, but that
You never given me
Bobby
one.
Robson and Ferenc Puskas.
Sorry?
I gave you one that involved Bobby Robson and Ferenc Puskas in the most unlikely of circumstances.
Bobby Robson, ex-manager of Ipswich, then England.
Yes.
And Puskás, who was the great Hungarian
That's right.
football player.
Yes.
And Robson played for England, so I would imagine they played against each other.
Well, I suppose that they did, but the actual the question would be about the North American Professional Soccer League and who was manager of the Vancouver Royals at the time when they were playing the San Francisco Golden Gales, and who were the managers?
It's a good question. I have a significant degree of indifference about American soccer teams, I have to tell you.
Well, this was way back when they first started and they were testing.
Yes, I remember the time. Rodney Marsh, Pele, all that. And Bobby Moore and all
Bobby
that.
Robson was the manager of the Vancouver Royals, and Ferenc Puskas was the manager of the San Francisco Golden Gales.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. But as I say, I have no time for the North American Soccer League.
Well, then you're disqualified from this particular round in the quiz.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Right, it's now 42 minutes. We've been talking for 43 minutes, in fact. It's been very informative, and in fact, I'm going to actually send around a little note now, because although this has been live, I shall replay it tomorrow morning on Mirador Television, somewhere around 9:30. And I think that the family law section will be of a great interest to a lot of people. So
I can do the second bit, and you'll be streaming me to one man and his dog just when I will be having a chat with one man.
You also said that you want to interview your dog one day, which that will be very interesting. And can I give you another little anecdote about breakfast television?
Certainly.
When breakfast television was people were saying, "Oh, we'll experiment with it; it'll never work," and so on and so forth. I can't remember whether it was ABC or CBS, one of the two, who became very successful. And the reason they became very successful was the morning anchor held an interview with the king penguin.
Keith, are you on heavy medication, or are you just buying it from the street? I'm just asking.
Well, no, I'm just pointing out that if you have an interview with your dog, it just might send the ratings zooming.
Yeah, hold it. Give me a moment, Keith. Here's my dog. Yes. I just thought that you would like to see him.
Absolutely. Well, I did meet him. I didn't meet him on Sunday, but
no. Yeah, but yes. He's been missing me, and he knows if I say it's a daddy day, he knows I'm there.
Right.
If I put my suit on, he goes frankly mental.
It means that you're leaving for the day.
He knows, and that I've got two big black bags here. A new one and an old one. And the old one, the only reason I don't use it anymore is because he simply chewed through the handles. Because he associates it with me leaving.
Yeah.
But
well,
there we go.
Is another valued member of the team?
He is a valued member of the team. He will, I'm sure, have an interview with you at some point, Keith. He's got
Absolutely.
about, I've written them down, in fact. He's got about 70 words that he understands because he's a collie. And I think that's probably marginally more than you have, if I
Oh
may
yes,
say.
probably. Oh yes. Oh, far
Yeah.
more. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, I limit mine to about a dozen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Then I can claim that I was misunderstood. Good
Keith,
to talk to
it's
you.
been lovely seeing you, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to be there live in the morning, but you'll appreciate it.
We've got months and months stretching ahead of us, so
Yeah.
I'm sure that you and Philip will be on very regularly. So I'm sorry if I tease you by driving by you in the morning just as you're starting out on your journey in
No,
the train to Portsmouth. But there we
Keith,
go. That's the way the
Keith,
cookie crumbles.
you wouldn't. You're going too fast to notice anything. Let's be fair.
It's
You're,
it's my thinking time.
yeah. You're driving like a madman, and I do worry. I don't feel I can end up representing you.
Oh dear,
Um,
I've been relying upon that.
um, and
When I see the thing
equally,
hit 6 miles an hour, I think, oh my goodness me, what if a
yeah.
copper stops me?
Equally, I'm actually I will prosecute you because I get paid for doing that. That's fine.
Right, you are. See you in court.
Lovely.
Toodle
Take
pip.
care. Bye bye.